Hey everyone, it's Craig from the University of Applied Research and Development, and I'm delighted to have with us Jeremy Knauff, who's a veteran and also the CEO of Spartan Media. Hi, Jeremy.
Hey, Craig. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm really, really delighted. Thank you for your service.
My pleasure.
Why don't you tell us about how and why you joined the military? What was your motivation for that?
So, like most men, when I was a kid, I, grew up watching the action movies, thinking how cool it would be to go do all this awesome stuff and, protect people and, serve your country and do all these things. And as I got older, I kind of started to learn a little bit more about the military, the different branches, the different units within the branches. And I figured, well, if we're going to do this, let's go all the way and let's go for the hardest branch out there. Sometime around high school, I think it was around, I don't know, 10th grade or so, I made the shift and decided that the Marine Corps was the path I was going. And that's where we went from there. So I ended up in the Marine Corps infantry for 4 years, multiple deployments. And after that was over with, I got out and started my own business.
Awesome. Tell us about some of your deployments that you did and your experiences.
So we had a lot of deployments. I was in before the whole Afghanistan and Iraq thing. So I unfortunately missed that, but we had, several peacetime deployments. We had a deployment to Bosnia as well. You're old enough to remember Bosnia was kind of an interesting place back in the 90s. I remember that was honestly, I think, probably one of the most fascinating places I've been for a number of reasons. And the way that they created the base that we lived on while we were there, I think was really unique. So they came in with the C-130s and they dropped, 2,000-pound bombs and just basically peppered this area that they wanted to put the base. What most people don't know is that Bosnia actually has a greater density of landmines per square mile than any other place in the world, including Cambodia, Vietnam, you name it.
Wow.
So they came in there and basically peppered this area with giant bombs to try and explode everything that was there. Then what they did was they dropped in these, they've got these, I forget what they're called, but they've got these great big bulldozer things. They're armor-plated bulldozer plows, I guess, for lack of a better word. And they would drop the tanks in with parachutes and attach those giant armored plows. And then the tanks would push out earth down to a certain depth, all in all four directions. So we now had these giant berms full of unexploded ordnance all around the entire base. And then they came back through with you may have seen the mine flails. It's like a cylindrical thing that attaches to the front of the tanks.
Right.
And it like spins with chains on it. So then they went through and just beat the hell out of everything there just to try and get all of the landmines, unexploded artillery, grenades, whatever was there. And there was a ton of it there. And so we lived in these aircraft hangars, basically. They were like these kind of Quonset hut type shape deals, kind of a half circle with visqueen plastic. And that's it kept us dry, but it didn't really do anything for any kind of warmth. And that was a pretty cold place. And I remember going out the back hatch of this aircraft hangar and, you could reach out and, not too far from your hand, you would have, giant artillery shells and rockets and landmines still sitting in these berms that are, right out here, almost in reaching distance. So, it was a really interesting place, but it was a good deployment because, we were stopping some terrible things that were going on there. So I found that to be, an interesting deployment for a number of reasons. But we also had a lot of other deployments to a number of other places where there was really nothing. It was just training. We were on a med float where basically the Marine Corps will put a deployment over in the Pacific and over in the Mediterranean. And then, of course, we've got people in Australia, Okinawa, and a few other places so that the U.S. has the ability to put Marines on the ground literally anywhere in the world within 24 hours.
Right.
So as part of that, during our what they call the med float, I was with the 22nd MEU. That is the designation for the unit that is out there in the Mediterranean when I was with 3-2 Lima Company. And, we just kind of floated around the area in case anything pops off. And in the meantime, we're training, we're doing things with various other countries. We did a lot of training with Greece. We went over to Africa, spent some time up in Tunisia, up on the northern tip of Africa, training their special forces, and just kind of bounced all over the world. Did a big NATO operation up in Norway. I think it was like 60 miles or so south of the Arctic Circle. That was quite an interesting experience. Spent some time in some deserts, some jungles, a little bit of everything.
Wow. In emergencies and war, often the chaos creates opportunity for the criminal element and human trafficking and all sorts of bad things. And when you're saying about the bad things that happened and that during that Bosnia time, what were some of those things that you needed to deal with?
Well, I would say it was pretty quiet while we were there. For obvious reasons, people don't want to get too rowdy when the Marines are around. So they quieted down. And we've had that kind of thing happen a lot. I remember multiple times when we were on the ship and something would pop off. There was one in particular that I remember over in Israel, right in the little, between Israel and Palestine and all that. And they started getting rowdy. They started having riots and, shooting and rockets and all of that. So they went ahead and spun the ship around and we were on the way there. So, of course, everybody, you load up your magazines, you take all your gear, you get everything up to the flight deck, and basically we're waiting on the green light to go in. And as soon as they found out that that ship was coming with a battalion of Marines, everyone got real calm for some reason. So that's quite often. That's how it works out quite often. So I would say that I would not put anything that I've done in the same category as what some of these younger kids have done in Afghanistan and Iraq. We had a lot of deployments, but it was pretty peaceful in my perspective, right? Like, I think that maybe other people might find it a little more chaotic or a little more dangerous, but I think it was relatively tame.
How did you find the transition coming back into civilian life after being in the military after your tour?
I found the transition to be pretty simple because I had been preparing for probably the last year or so before I got out, right? So I was planning on starting a business. That business failed. Not a big deal. Like, this is going to happen a lot of times. If you start a business, you're probably going to fail most of the time. And I forget what the stat is. I think it's something like 80%. The Small Business Administration they track this. So a lot of businesses, I don't know what the exact stat is, but a lot of them do fail. But the point is, I did a lot of preparation. I did a lot of studying. I planned for starting a business, put together a business plan, started creating contacts, doing all the things I had to do. And I kind of had that life, what my life was going to be like. I had that planned in my head. It didn't go the way I expected it to, but I had a plan. And when I got out, things were a lot different than they are now, because there wasn't all of these awesome programs that they have. And there wasn't this sense within the community of, hey, let's support the veterans. I mean, people would tie the little yellow flag around the tree back then. That was big during the first Iraq War. But it was kind of a, thank you for service. Let's stick a bumper sticker on. And that's about the extent of it. Whereas now there's tons of transition assistance programs, even the transition programs within the military when they're prepping before they get out. Those are far superior to what we had when we were getting out. I think we spent about a week in what we call TAPS, Transition Assistance Program, back in the day. I don't know if it's still the same thing there, but I found the transition relatively easy. And, in the military, we've got a very different work ethic. It's kind of that no excuse mindset, and we're going to work harder. We're going to work longer. We're going to do more than everyone else. So when I got out into the civilian world, I mean, this could sound kind of arrogant, but it was really easy because the people that I was competing against, they weren't on that level. They were, they wanted to take it easy and they didn't want to put in the effort and, go above and beyond. So I found the transition relatively easy. I know that that's not the case for everyone for a variety of reasons, especially some of these, younger guys. Well, younger guys. I mean, there's plenty of, I guess, older people too who have been in those the recent theaters, but these people who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, I think some of them have a harder time because of
Right.
some of the stuff that they went through over there, not just from a conflict perspective, but also from how the military is treated, right? Like you've got the burn pits thing, right? This is this generation's version of Agent Orange, right? So you're having all these health problems from this, things like that. So the transition is better in some ways now, but it's worse in other ways for the people getting out at this particular stage in time.
Right. You mentioned that you found that you had a competitive advantage because of the skill set, the mindset, the attitude that you had when you came out. How do you find this generation of workers coming into the workforce right now? What's their attitude and how do they rank?
So when you say this generation, give me a little more precision.
Yeah, so the 18 to 25-year-olds who are entering the workforce now and maybe leaving study or choosing not to study, but go into the workforce.
Okay, great. So I think it really comes down to the individual. A lot of people have in my opinion, a distorted perception of the younger generations. And maybe that's just a thing that's human nature, that as we get older, we think these younger people are lazy or not as smart as we were or whatever. I don't really think that's true. I think that perception comes from the fact that when we're dealing with these younger people, it typically is in, let's say, a fast food job or a grocery store or, something like that, where it's their first job. They're not experienced. But in my world, I come from the tech world. You see some of the smartest people you'll ever meet, and they're incredibly driven. So I think it's a matter of where you're looking at them. So, I've got a girl we just brought onto our team recently. She's, I think, 24. I feel like she looks like she's about 12, but she's just an absolute rock star, right? She's young. She's in that generation, but she works hard. She is proactive. She's smart. So this is the thing, is people are just looking at the wrong things, or they're looking at or maybe even they're looking for the wrong things, right? Because we want to say, oh, well, we were better. Now this next batch, they don't know what they're doing. And I don't think that's the case. I think you're going to find just as many smart, proactive, hardworking people in any generation as you will in another. But what's different is they want different things. So, like my father's generation, my grandfather's generation, you go and you work somewhere for, 20, 30 years, you get that retirement watch from the company, you've got the pension, all of that stuff. That's not what people want anymore. That's especially the younger generations, right? They want to create the life that they want. They want to be able to come and go when they please. They want to be able to do the job, be judged on their performance, but not be micromanaged. They want to dictate their own hours. And I don't think that's unreasonable, right? Like, we've got all this technology, we've got the ability, the infrastructure, we've got everything to where we can give them that kind of a work environment, allow them to thrive and still crush it for our companies. And, we can benefit from that while they have the work environment they want. That's my perspective on it.
Yeah, that's great. I think we do find what we're looking for. And I find that this generation now that's entering the workforce and carving a place out for themselves, they're really looking for meaning and purpose. And they see that work is actually an opportunity to do that. It's not disconnected from the rest of their lives. Rather than something they might do 9 to 5, they could do the work any time of the day and get it done really well, and then go and do whatever else it is that they want to do. It is a change of mindset, I think, for employers and leaders now. Do you think that the people coming out of the military, veterans, do you think they have difficulty managing, leading, working with that particular generation?
Not the generation, but with the mindset. So,
right.
And I will admit there's probably some bias in my answer here, because I come from the infantry. We tend to handle things very differently. In a corporate environment, you can't really, throw knife hands while you're talking and drop the F-bomb in every conversation. That's it's not really socially accepted as the way that it is in the military. We are very direct. We're very short, very to the point. That's the way it was in the infantry, particularly. So
Right.
there's this great kind of a group of memes on. It's like this military to like corporate translation. Have you ever seen? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think
It's
so.
like this. Yeah. So that's like a perfect example of it. It's like, well, I don't know if we curse on your podcast, so I'll skip it for today. But that group of memes is a perfect example. It's like, instead of saying XYZ, whatever that thing is, say this, and it's like the brash, harsh, aggressive military thing with insults and curse words and all kinds of stuff, and then here's the corporate cleaned up PC version of it. And I think that's where the disconnect is between these veterans and the civilian world. Is they're coming out of this world where this is just how we communicate, and nobody gets upset, nobody gets in their feelings about it. But the civilians who aren't used to that absolutely do get upset and get in their feelings about it. So I think that's where more of the disconnect comes from.
Right. Well, tell us about what you're doing now with Spartan Media.
So the website doesn't reflect this right now, but we are focused on public relations. Right now, the website is a classic cobbler's kid scenario. As you and I were discussing earlier, there's a few things broken on there. But so we haven't updated it to reflect this. But this actually came from an interesting scenario that happened a few years ago, where I was faced with a health crisis that almost killed me. And I spent about 2 years on my deathbed. We burned through every penny we had, just me trying to stay alive. And then, well, now here we are. The business is completely run down to zero. The personal savings is run down to zero. And I've got no current clients, no current case studies, no current examples of anything. So in the marketing world, I'm no better than some random guy on Fiverr, right? So I had to get myself back on top very quickly. And what I ended up doing was I leveraged public relations along with some social media and SEO to basically reestablish myself as an authority in the marketing industry. And sometimes we can be a little bit slow. We don't see what's right in front of us. So I didn't realize how important that what I did was. And after a while, somebody was like, well, why don't you do that for other people, right? Because up until then, I had run this as a full service agency. And we still do a lot of the same things we've done before, but we approach it a little bit differently. We approach it from a PR perspective. So what we do now is we take the same approach that I used to basically rebuild my life, rebuild my authority status through public relations, social media, and SEO, and branding, things like that, to take somebody who is a recognized expert, and we all know somebody like this, and a lot of us are this person, right? You're an expert at what you do, but most people don't know that. So we take that expert and we turn them into a recognized authority in their industry. We get them featured in the media, get them positioned so that when someone sees them, they can clearly see their expertise and they're able to help people solve a particular problem. And that's what we've pivoted to. Is for the last couple of years now, we've been focusing entirely on that aspect. It's the public relations and turning someone into a recognized authority.
How long does it take for someone to see a meaningful difference, like generating business for them when you're building their authority?
So that depends on whether they want to try and do things their way or whether they want to listen. So I actually had a client that we had to fire not too long ago because he believed that he knew better than us. So he was doing things that were counterproductive. Case in point, he had recently been accepted into the Forbes Council. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, they will accept anybody whose credit card will clear, right? It's not this exclusive thing, right? If you have a pulse and a credit card, you can write for Forbes in the Forbes Council.
Wow.
So, we had started this campaign for him, and we were doing all these awesome things, getting him lined up in various what I would call tier one media outlets like Entrepreneur and Forbes, the real side of Forbes, not the council, various top level real estate publications, all kinds of things. And he comes to me and says, well, I want to do a press release about the fact that I've been accepted into Forbes Council. And I was like, oh, okay, no, we don't want to do this. And he's like, no, absolutely. He's like, everybody I tell thinks it's awesome. And I was like, okay, I understand that the people you tell think it's awesome, but most people realize that that the Forbes Council is stupid. There's no journalistic standards, right? There's nothing. It's a pay to play thing that literally anyone can do. I was like, aside from the fact that most real entrepreneurs know that it's bullshit, when a journalist sees that you're putting out a press release about being put in the accepted into the Forbes Council, they're going to think you're an idiot, and they'll be right. So he's like, well, listen, I want to do it because then I can put all of these as featured in logos, right? Because when you put out a press release, it gets syndicated to multiple news outlets. And I was like, all right, look, when a press release is syndicated, you're not featured. That's just syndication. And it's probably going to get deleted within 30 days, as most of them are. But the bigger issue is you weren't actually featured there. You were just syndicated. And if a reporter sees you do that, they're going to think that you have zero integrity. Well, a week or so goes by. I've got him on an interview with a reporter at Bankrate, huge financial publication. And as she's interviewing him, she goes onto his social media profiles, and there in the header of his little cover photo at the top is as featured in all these different logos. And she's like, oh, well, I see that you were featured in here and here and here. And I was like, oh, shit. I was like, what is this about? And I went and I pulled up the profile, and there it is. He went and did the press release on his own, then put that he was featured in all of these places. And I was like, look, why don't we just go ahead and put a pin in this for now? Let me find out what's going on, and then we'll circle back on this. Well, long story short, he didn't get featured in that article because she now believed he had no integrity. And the reality was she was right. He had no integrity because I told him how that would be perceived, and he chose to do it anyway, knowing that he wasn't actually featured in any of those places. The bigger problem for him was not only did he not get featured in Bankrate, but that particular journalist wrote for like 6 other publications, including the Wall Street Journal and a number of other very prominent publications. So he's now blacklisted at all of those outlets. Fortunately, I had a great relationship with that journalist. So, her and I talked about what happened, and it didn't hurt me, but he's now blacklisted from several major media outlets. And journalists talk about this kind of stuff. So, there's private PR groups where journalists will share stories like this, and then that spreads. So that's one example of how things can go wrong. But there's other things where, like as we're talking about how long it takes, things like that, there's other aspects to this. So it's not just the getting featured, but it's then using those features to reinforce your authority. Right. So when I went out and did it with myself initially, I didn't just go get the stuff, in an article somewhere. I then took those articles, those TV segments, those podcast episodes, all those different pieces of publicity, and I used them in my social media, and I was constantly sharing them. And I was, if I was reaching out to somebody, let's say I was going to reach out to somebody about a topic. Here's a perfect example. Early on in the process, I wrote a particular article, and it was a very useful and timely topic. I then leveraged that article, and I pitched multiple other places to write the same topic for their media outlet. And then I also used that to pitch various podcasts to have me come on and talk about it. So it's using these different pieces in your social media, in your future pitches. You're talking to a prospect about doing business. They ask you a question. Oh, hey, that's a great question, Steve. Here's how I answered that in this article at the Wall Street Journal when they asked me about it, right? Well, now you've cemented in your authority, and you're promoting yourself without sounding like a douche, right? Because
No.
it's not, hey, look at how awesome I am. It's, hey, great question. The Wall Street Journal asked me about this, and here was my answer to them, and that will explain it in as much detail as you could possibly want, right? So this is how, when we kind of take this holistic approach to it, it can happen very fast. But if we think that we're just going to get featured in a bunch of places and then just not do anything with it, then it's just not going to happen. It's not even going to be a matter of taking longer. It just won't work. So
Right.
it's we get the publicity, and then we leverage that in all aspects of our business. When we do that, you can start becoming a recognized authority within a matter of months.
Oh, that's quite short.
Yes, indeed.
Now, I reached out to you through Podbooker to get hold of you and see if you would be willing to come on our interview. And also, your LinkedIn is really, really active. So what's the best way for people to get hold of you?
So, well, like you and I were talking about this morning, or this afternoon, rather, the website right now is broken, so the contact form is not working. But if, anybody can reach me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect, shoot me a DM. On the other hand, if you do go to Spartan Media, rather than using the contact form there, if you go spartanmedia.com/authority, that will actually work as well. So that one there is a form there that does function. So either one, LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on Twitter as well, or, spartanmedia.com/authority. All of those are easy ways to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, Jeremy, again, thank you for your service, and thank you so much for being with us. Are there any final thoughts that you might like to give as we wrap up to people who are preparing to go back into civilian life from the military? Because you spent a year planning, and I thought that's really smart. So what would you suggest?
I would suggest knowing what the end result that you want is, and then reverse engineering what you have to do to get there. So a lot of people, they think, well, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, whatever that thing is, but they don't make a plan to get there. And then because they don't have a plan, they can't take steady, consistent action towards it. They get distracted by their, just the crazy stuff that comes up in day-to-day life, or, emotions or finances, whatever, right? So it's easy to get sidetracked. And if you don't have a plan, it's even easier. So I actually have a quote that's related to this that I came up with and then kind of have tweaked over the years. And that is, failure catches the weak when they put today's comfort over tomorrow's goals. And really, this just comes down to the same way we approach things in the military. You have a mission, and then you create a plan to accomplish that mission. It's really that simple. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Great. Well, Jeremy Knauff, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us, and all the best with Spartan Media. Please don't go anywhere. I'd like to have a quick little chat with you just after we wrap up. And for everyone else watching the recording, you'll see that we've got Jeremy's link to his LinkedIn profile is actually with the show notes. So whether you're looking on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, on anywhere on Twitch where you're seeing this recording, there'll be Jeremy's contact details there as well. We look forward to seeing you again on another Veteran Stories.